So I'd like to welcome everyone to the Graduate Mentoring Center's Trailblazers series. This is our public talk with our guest and our Trailblazer scholar in residence, Dr. Mintzi Martinez-Rivera. Before we begin, I'd like to just invite all of you really to take a breath. It's something that we invite people to do at the center to situate yourself, to bring our attention in whatever way we are able to what we are about to engage and what we're about to enter. And so wherever you are, however you are able to breathe, however you are to make yourself comfortable, to just please do so, but to just take a breath, inhaling and exhaling, and again, inhaling and exhaling, and again, inhaling and exhaling. The Graduate Mentoring Center acknowledges that we human beings are reliant and dependent on the earth for our lives and survival, and that the earth sustains us as it did our ancestors, without whom it would not be possible for any of us to be here. We acknowledge and honor the Miami, Delaware, Potawatomi, and Shawnee people on whose ancestral homelands and resources Indiana University at Bloomington is built. And we encourage all of us to learn about the histories of the people whose ancestors cared for this land and the histories that have made it possible for us to be here together on them without the physical presence of those people. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Maria Hamilton Abegunde. I am the founding director of the Graduate Mentoring Center and a faculty member in the Department of African American and African Diaspora Studies. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to see so many people here today for this part of the Trailblazers series. And so, a little bit about the center and then to talk about Trailblazers. The Graduate Mentoring Center is one of the President's Diversity Initiatives. That is, we are a program at Indiana University, Bloomington, in the University Graduate School that is designed to recruit and retain underrepresented populations and communities and students from those communities. And so we are both part of recruitment and retainment as one of the few graduate mentoring centers in the country. The other is at IUPUI. And so we are happy to do this work and offer many different types of programming. Um, Most recently, the Academy is contemplative practice, a writing group, a sitting meditation. We do have a mentoring cohort. And we also offer this particular series, Trailblazers and Innovators. And this particular program is designed to invite scholars of color to campus. Usually that is 5 days on campus, 4 to 5 days. And you all know that's a long time to ask a scholar to be away from their home campus. But we have been fortunate in the past 5 or 6 years to have scholars agree to do this. And they come, they meet with students, faculty, and staff. We've had the pleasure of having faculty who are historians, physicists, astrophysicists, um, everything, psychologists. And so the idea is also to introduce students in particular to a range of scholars in a range of fields. And so this is part of that ongoing effort to provide both formal and informal mentoring for students. And the scholar usually comes and will do a public talk in addition to those other things. And so it is a lot of commitment that we ask that scholar to do, a lot of work that we ask them to do. And so last year when we invited Dr. Martinez-Rivera to come, of course, she was all set to come. We had everything done, and 2020, there it was, March. And so we thought, well, we're not going to try to reschedule anything. And lucky we did not in the months that were to follow. We decided to just let it go and asked if she would be willing to come back again in a different format. And we talked about what would be the best format to present what would normally be a very hands-on, in-person approach to the work. And she agreed. And so if you have seen the flyer, you'll know that she is meeting with us once or twice a month, beginning last month through April. Again, a large commitment to do this work. And so we are grateful for her being here. I'm going to introduce our wonderful humans who will be talking with us. I'm going to begin with Dr. Solomon Otero before talking about Dr. Martinez-Rivera, and then we will begin the conversation. Dr. Solomon Otero is well known for her research in gender, sexuality, spirituality, and Yoruba religious practices throughout the Afro-Caribbean. She is the author of Afro-Cuban Diasporas in the Atlantic World and co-editor of Yemonja, Gender, Sexuality, and Creativity in Latino, Latina, and Afro-Atlantic Diasporas. She's also, and this is, she also is the author of a new book called Archives of Condor, which is absolutely fabulous. Her work has been featured in journals such as the Journal of American Folklore, Western Folklore, Africa Today, and the American Journal of Psychoanalysis. She is a professor of folklore at ethnomusicology, and Dr. Otero, I'd like to note, is also one of our faculty mentors. Dr. Mintzi Aunda Martinez-Rivera is an assistant professor of anthropology in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at Providence College. Her research and teaching focus on Pero Hepicha culture, indigenous youth culture, indigenous popular culture, expressive cultural practices, critical indigenous and anti-oppressive research methods, and cultural transformations. She is currently working on her book manuscript tentatively titled Getting Married in Agahuan, Creating Culture, Performing Community. She is also currently co-editing together with Dr. Solomon Otero and Rachel V. Gonzalez, a special volume on Latinx folkloristics, transnational WOC perspectives for the Journal of American Folklore. For the last 2 years, she has cooperated with the Social Justice Collaborative, a nonprofit organization in California that provides legal aid on immigration cases. Dr. Martinez-Rivera, I'm really happy to say, was one of the first 3 faculty mentors for the GMC. Our conversation this evening will focus on their co-edited volume, Theorizing Folklore from the Margins, Critical and Ethnical Approaches, and that will be published by Indiana University Press in June of this year. So we want to welcome you, Dr. Martinez-Rivera, for making the circle full and round for us and giving back, and to Dr. Otero for coming to IU and jumping in and allowing us to have this moment. And so I want to begin actually with a question. I'm going to give the question to you, but I do want you all to spend some time as part of answering that question with maybe just some initial thoughts, right, about anything about this process, about being here, anything at all. But I want to begin with the question. I only have 4 questions, and any of those questions can be thrown out of the window at any time, just because we like to be organic and we like to allow the work to lead us where it wants to be led, right? So I want to begin by asking you both to talk about the origins of this book. What was that moment for both of you, either together or separately, when you said, oh yeah, this is the book we should write, and we should co-edit, we should put together, we should do it together. Can you talk about that moment?
So kind of like to start, I want to obviously start by thanking you, Abegunda, for the invitation last year and then again this year to come and participate in this project. And you know, when you first approached me, I was like, wait, what have I done to be part of this series? And then as we work, I'm like, oh wait, I've done a lot. There's still much to be done, right? So in terms of the work, but at least, you know, to be able to share a little bit of what I've been doing in the last kind of like 15 years to some degree, because obviously this work that we're going to start celebrating today did not just happen in the last 3 years that Sonia and I have been working, but has a long, long history. But before kind of like going in, and also kind of like so happy to be, as always, here with the brilliant and amazing Solimar. I want to also recognize that I'm coming to you from the land of the Narragansett over here in Rhode Island, to acknowledge also that where Providence College sits is, again, the land of the Narragansett. And I also want to acknowledge the land where my family in Mexico is coming from, and that my dad's origin, so the Purepecha community in the state of Michoacan. So to honor and respect and cherish our histories and our lineages. So with that, kind of like I don't know, Soli, do you want to start with the conversation? And actually, I have a PowerPoint with pictures.
Of course you do. No, I just wanted to say before Mintzi takes it over with the PowerPoint, she's just so organized. I can't live without Mintzi. I want to thank Dr. Abagunde for inviting me to be part of this celebration of Mitzi's work and inviting us to present this work. And I also want to thank everybody for being here this afternoon on what's considered a wellness day, as well as I want to thank the authors who contributed to this volume, which is a collective act. For those of you who are here, I want to thank you for being part of this. So,
yes, definitely. And we have here with us a nice group of the authors also. So we're so happy that you're here. So to some degree, the origin of this project actually came from Chiriku and Chiriku Journal in 2017, when Dr. John Nieto Phillips approached both Solimar and I, I think it was like January, approached us to see if we wanted to edit a volume on Latinx folklore. And so we were like, yes, of course. And, the elections had just happened, right? The new government, the previous, administration had just come in. And so when we were brainstorming what is the focus that we want to talk about, right? Soli was like, we need to talk about poder y cultura, right? In terms of what are the ways in which our communities are creating strategies of resilience and to be able to survive violence. So I don't know, Soli, if you want to add.
No, absolutely. It was such a wonderful invitation because, I think there was a lot of anxiety, and there was already a lot of many forms of violence being felt in our respective communities. And so when we had the opportunity to kind of brainstorm and think about how we could imagine community differently as well. On the cover, we have the art of Juana Alicia. This is from a mural from the Berkeley BART. I think it's the Ashby Station. It's a mural that's talking about the different oil spills and the pollution in the ocean. So we also wanted to extend our idea of relationship and kin and framework of all these different communities that we felt were being kind of under violence. So this was a really great opportunity to look at Latinx folklore as a vehicle to explore all these different issues.
Mm-hmm. So this is the table of content, and the reason why I'm showing this in terms of images is that a lot of the work in terms of curating, also of how we curated this volume, really then afterwards we continue expanding it in the book. So one of the things that for me was so important is the way that we pushed, and we wanted to push this idea of what counts as academic writing, because in the case of Chiriku, right, they do incorporate it, which is one of the amazing features of this journal, is that they incorporate scholarly works as well as creative works, right? You don't get that in a lot of academic journals. But one of the things that Solimar and I really wanted to do is that we had two pieces that would be counted or considered as creative works, but we're like, no, they need to be in the scholarly works, because we were really clear that we wanted to push this boundary and this idea of what counts again as creative as well as compared to scholarly. And those two pieces are specifically Rachel Gonzalez Martin's piece of Latinx Folkloristics Love Letter to American Folkloristics, which is the first piece of the scholarly works. And then the last piece of that section, which is Rosalinda Fregoso's The Art of Witness. which both of these pieces combine a lot of autoethnography, reflection, creative writing, as well as obviously scholarly work. Soli?
Yeah, and those two pieces really did the job of witnessing in a very different way. So that we really wanted to do that. And Chirico was a great platform also because we could use as much Portuguese, Spanish, even if you can use indigenous languages. It's a very flexible platform, and it really wanted to highlight the form that we were having these conversations with. We also wanted to highlight what counted as folklore as well. And I think that that's kind of where the impetus of saying, hey, this is a much bigger project. We're looking at Latinx folklore in this particular way, but maybe there's a larger conversation in terms of the many different strands of folklorist work that might have been on the margins that can be part of a mosaic and bringing those conversations to the center because people are doing the work. So we also did have other scholar artists as well in here. For example, we had the work of Martin Sang, who is a master beater, and so we also had people who were working with material culture and with other forms as well. So there was a lot of there's a lot of kind of different genres being represented.
And so this work, we started doing it in January, which is when we got the invitation, and then this volume was published in December. Very, very quick turnaround for the volume. So that was December 2017. So I think by February, I started emailing Soli, January or February. I was like, so do you want to continue working? And do we want to continue the...
She had a plan. She said, I think we started realizing when we saw the energy that the collaborators were of this particular kind of manifestation of the project, that the energy that was being manifested, that we felt that this was an energy we could bring into more broadly the field of folklore, but then also kind of to bring in these different communities that we were talking about. Oh, and mention, Mintzi, that the volume was well received.
Oh yes, so this one, was published in December, and actually by February, Chirico was recognized by Project Muse as one of the what was the label, the innovative, most popular new journals
downloaded or something. Like it had the most that it was getting a lot of kind of
traction, and one of the pieces actually that, especially inside the discipline of folklore, that really also got attention was actually Rachel's piece. And so it was incredibly well received. So with this piece, this work that we did being so well received, and then this kind of these ideas that we kind of started simmering and going through as we work with Chirico, I was like, Soli, we need to continue this, and and they were like, yes, we need to continue the conversation, and that then led to this project. So we started basically this project. And I think the call for papers and abstract went out in March 2018. Working on this. So basically by January 2019, we had the full manuscript. Kind of the first to be able to send it for review. And then, working on everything. And I think the final manuscript was done February or January to 2020, and it takes 18 months for the whole production. So this is why it's coming out last year. But how we wanted to continue the work that we started with Chirico, but then obviously expanded in other places. Soli?
Yes. So I mean, some of the people that were in the Chirico volume joined us with different pieces for this work. I mentioned Martin Sang, Alexander Fernandez, but then we also were able to bring in folks that, here's the table of contents. Wonderful, thank you. Folks that were working in other areas, whether they were working in Africa, in Puerto Rico, or doing work with pedagogy. Katie Borland's here, her chapter's on pedagogy, or doing work in Cuba with art and different forms of queer culture. Corey Thorne is here. I want to give a shout out to everybody who's here.
Yeah, also disabilities, right? So the work and the ignored work also, and ignored community in disabilities, right? So that we also have here Phyllis in her brilliant piece,
That's right.
right?
Yeah, that's a wonderful piece. Yeah.
So pieces also that we invited our collaborators to think beyond academic writing. So we have this brilliant piece also by Gloria Colombraña, who is also here with us, that it's this beautiful, you know, it's a different type of academic writing, so that she did this beautiful paintings and collage with footnotes. So we're asking also, and we invited people to think about also how we're reading and how we're engaging with the work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, we really expanded the idea, and the book has, like, you know, 3 different sections: critical paths, framing the narrative, or I think it's 4 sections:
Sure.
framing, visualizing the present, and placing community. And we really wanted these different sections to kind of build off of each other. And it's really, we say in the introduction, it's an invitation from the margins, for those not only in folklore but those in related fields, right? Literature, anthropology, different area studies. And we really wanted to create this kind of, like I said, a mosaic, a space where we can think about methods, and we can think about the communities that we work with. We can think about the communities that we work with and maybe are also a part of, as real collaborators, and really thinking about shifting the idea of authority, which is really difficult to do in presenting a book, right? Because a book is still a book, and we still had to get it published with an academic press. But we really tried our best to kind of create the places where we could do those negotiations with this work. So yeah, and so it just kind of grew from Chiriku to this.
Yeah. And
Thank-
sorry. Just one more
Oh.
picture. And I'm done with pictures. Oh, and the cover is another original piece by Juan Alicia. So let me, I don't know here, this picture is obviously like all, so from her new project, right, Soli, if I remember correctly?
Yeah, it's from a new project where she's working with different I think it's a Mayan mythologies and stories, and really and doing a pictorial project alongside with her husband. And it's actually work that's being done also in indigenous languages, so it's a language project as well. It's an art and language project.
Yeah, so this is our cover, and I am done with the PowerPoint and images.
Marvelous. Thank you so much. I was going to ask you all to come back, actually, as I was, to show that cover again, because the cover is absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much for that. So there are a few things that you've said that I want to come back to, or that I'm hearing, right? So talking about the purpose of this volume, right? And actually asking people to think differently about how they're reading, but what counts as academic, right? Particularly for creative scholars, and particularly for people who consider themselves to be academic in a very strict way, and how the academy dictates that. Could you all talk a little bit about research as creativity, or research as a creative practice, right? And what does that mean to you? What did it mean, not only in terms of the authors you selected, and recognizing that their research, their methodology is part of a creative practice and not just research that seems to be defined in a very strict way, in terms of analysis, in terms of the development of theory. What is the creative? What is research as creativity? And how is the act of actually gathering, and you say curate, as if you're talking about an exhibition, as if you are talking about groups of works that must be in dialogue in a particular way, but are not limited or not even bound by the binding in which they find themselves. Could you talk a little bit about that for us?
That's a lot of different things to be able to start unpacking.
You already know that's how that's gonna go, right?
Yeah. So no, so So I really think definitely when we're thinking about research, we need to, the same way that we think about knowledge, and that we're trying to move away from these very narrow understandings of knowledge, we need to think about different in terms of how we do research. And definitely I agree with that, this creative process, and also especially in collaboration. And how this process of research, right, and this process of creation is very much done in collaboration and in community. So one of the things though, when as you were talking about that first part and thinking of how we can think about theory and how we can think about research, is I was thinking actually of these group of scholars that they're talking about how, you know, we cannot separate research and knowledge creation from our own bodies, especially for in some cases, right, from people of color, especially if we're doing also research in our own communities, right, and how research does not stop when we leave the community, right, because it's all we're always embodying that particular experience. And this is specifically, I'm thinking of this article on that is focusing on fugitive anthropology, right, and that is really talking again of these very embodied experience of doing the research, right, and living it and engaging with it, right, and as way then afterwards turning it into knowledge, if we want to think about it in that particular process. You know, for me actually, and working in this article and in this book with Solia gave me an opportunity of trying to think about definitely the way that I was thinking about knowledge and writing and this creative process. So the piece of my article, and kind of like feel selfish to talk about my piece in this article, which actually we'll talk about a little bit more later in our conversation in April. It was a piece, an article that I was writing that I wanted to send published to one of these very traditional anthropological journals, and it kept being rejected. And I was really struggling because it was a story that I really wanted to get out. But I think the struggle was that it was not an authentic story, because I was trying to fit it into these very narrow constraints of what academic knowledge is supposed to be. So when Solia and we started working on this, and Solia asked me, and I think one of our early meetings, she's like, so what are you going to submit for the book? And I'm like, wait, what? And and I'm like, well, let me actually rework this piece into the story that I want to tell about, you know, what it means to do research in a conflict zone. And then, you know, using your poem, right, as a framing and as a way of me being able to find my voice. Because I've been having trouble finding my voice in academic writing, and what I finally figure out is because my voice does not conform to these narrow definitions of academic knowledge that comes from Western European Enlightenment, you know, paradigms, and I was hitting a wall constantly. So this, and even one as an editor and then as a contributor, allowed me the space to be able to play with my voice and to actually free my voice to be able to tell the stories that I want to tell and the ways that I want to tell them. And so really here was the, you know, thinking about this creative process, and as we tie it in with research and theory and ways of thinking and ways of doing. So I have to say that I'm loving now the work of doing editing work, because I'm like, let's see how we can continue changing and breaking the mold. But again, it allowed me the space for me to be able also to write what I needed to write.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and to that, I think that was it, and that story is a very important story to tell, because that we couldn't find them anywhere. That's a quote from Thomas Glave, a Jamaican writer that I like quite a lot, and how he writes stories that he couldn't find in other spaces. Yeah, being a folklorist who works in Cuba with her family as well as other people involved with the Santeria community, I did not have really a choice, if I was, you know, ethically, to not consider creativity as an important epistemology, ontology, pedagogy. It was basically, if I was being genuine in the work I was doing, in the interactions that I was having with my community, I would ask a question, a direct interview question, and I'd get a story about the gods in response. Or there'd be a situation and there'd be a ritual where an ancestor would say something about something I had to put in my book, right? And so this is kind of the background of how I was kept on trying to do work in a certain way. And I realized if I was being genuine to the experience of actually learning from the community, from my community, that I would have to understand creativity as an important mode of not only creating knowledge, but creating new paths to how to be in the world. It's a lot more than even knowledge. And so it forced us to really think, when we were thinking about the book, we think about how were we going to engage with thinking about methodology, right? And we took a little bit of a cue from Edward Glissant and the idea of opacity, where that the idea is not necessarily that everything's knowable in an ethnographic way, but that there are certain things that may be secret, that may not be known, but there are certain negotiations and conversations and routes that can be had. But what that means is there's going to be a shift in authority, right? To allow for the creative, we have to allow for multiple voices, and we have to allow for a shift in authority. And my piece actually in the volume deals with that. My work is actually focused on two artists, Anna Marie Laura, who's an author. Some of you might have seen her in one of our past folklore events, and also the Graduate Mentoring Center. I work with her poetry, and I also work with art as well, of Arturo Lindsay and some of performance healing art that he's done in Africa. And I was looking at those, and also RuPaul. And I was looking at ideas of authenticity, and how actually when you're working with communities creatively, what we're looking at is anti-authenticity in some ways, because authenticity is kind of a tool that folklorists use to authenticate or say something's genuine or not genuine. So really thinking of that taxonomy and turning it on its head, and thinking about the concept of realness as it comes out of kind of the drag community as maybe a better way to think through, and it comes out of the drag community directly from Afro Latinx and African American ideas of becoming and being and performing in the world. Anyway, all this to say is that when you allow for creativity to guide you in ways, it might be disorienting, you might be opaque at the beginning, but it's part of a different kind of process. It makes us ask different kinds of questions methodologically, and also makes us rethink ethically our relationship to those who we work with.
Thank you so much. I want to be both conscious of the time, but also of the questions that Marilyn White has a question. It actually is a question that I wanted to ask, but this is much fuller than I had in my head. So I want to go ahead and ask that. Mintzi, you used the word authentic in describing anthro-academic journals not accepting your work. Can you clarify? And were you not being authentic because of the constrictions of academic journals, or were they not recognizing your authenticity?
No, it was me. It was that I was trying to write in the way that, this notion of how anthropological knowledge is supposed to be, and and all that stuff. So I was not being authentic to myself, and I'm actually having problems with another article now, because it seems like I sometimes maybe do not learn. I was now stubbornly trying to get another article in another anthropology journal, and kept hitting the wall. And then I was actually talking to brilliant Rachel Gonzalez, and she's like, "Why are you trying to write something that is not the way that you want to write?" I'm like, I don't know. And I'm like, so
That's
now,
right.
Yeah, exactly. So she called me on it. And so I'm like, yeah, no, let me actually move and then write the way that I need to write. So it was me that I was not being authentic to myself and to my own voice. And because again, there's still very much this idea of what is proper academic way of writing, right? And I was trying to imitate that. But then I'm like, no, I can't. So I'm definitely at that process of finding as I said, my own voice and my own space. And I think definitely as a editor, it has allowed me to see what other people are doing, and not by poaching or stealing or anything of that, but just in case, but actually being inspired by the amazing work that other people are doing. And I'm like, oh my God, I can also do this. Right? I can also be part of these conversations and find also my own voice. So I am going into the route of being my authentic self also. So it was not, it's not necessarily them. For me, I'm like, you have too narrow a definition of what knowledge is. You should open it up, but
Yes.
You do you, I'm going to do me.
Yes. And I think that's why the volume, what we're trying to bring is our models of different kind of voices, people finding their voices, even voices in the archive that have been lost, invisibilized work that has been, we have some wonderful historians uncovering the work of women that hasn't been discovered. I mean, I think that all of the different pieces are doing this work differently. We also are really proud because of, in terms of voice and talking about like different modes, we have some creative nonfiction by Mabel Cuesta in Spanish, talking about experiences with the LGBTQ community in Cuba. And the IU Press was wonderful. They just said, we said, we want to publish this in Spanish without a translation. And they allowed for it. And I thought that that was really important to provide multiple models within the book for see, this, well, it is an academic book too, right? But see, and so really try, and so thinking about that, changing the paradigms and allowing for people to see what's possible. So
thank you. And Marilyn, thank you so much for that question. There are just a few things in my head. Mintzi, you talked about editing, what editing has allowed you to, to do, to be inspired, and then also to continue changing and breaking barriers. So, when we're talking about academic journals and we're talking about publishing in general, right, that editors are gatekeepers in very large ways, right? And so for this particular kind of work, it is a challenge inside or outside of the academy, right? There are few presses that have a wide enough space, right, to really challenge what we know to be academic writing, or how it's presumed to be. And so I just want to ask you then, like, in that role, right? Because there's a particular kind of power in that role. There's even more power in that role when you understand the possibilities for the vision and to changing an industry, right? Not even just changing a disciplinary path, but changing an industry. And I'm thinking about this in where I choose to submit work to, because this is the kind of work that I, do in terms of the combining all of those types of things. So knowing that now, both of you, right, knowing that, what does this mean for emerging scholars? Right? What does this mean for departments? What does this mean for courses and methodology? What does this mean for when someone is looking at moving from dissertation to book stage, particularly depending on your discipline, where publishers are asking for something that is more reader friendly, right? Almost trade book in some ways, right? What does this mean for emerging scholars? How should they be thinking about approaching their work? How do you advise, or might you advise to help them begin thinking about negotiating these different worlds, right? And the possible conflicts and that they will encounter as they're trying to prepare for editors like you all. And I know that there are others out there who are creating a space for this different type of voice.
I think this is something that Soli and we had very clear, that we were always to have a representation of different people in different stages and different journeys. So starting with Chiricu, we have that at the time she was an undergrad, Itzel Guadalupe Garcia's piece, Viva Alive, and then we invited her to submit something also for theorizing folklore from the margins. So she already finished her undergrad. She's now trying to get into MFA programs. But so that we have, again, undergrads, we have grad students, we have early scholars, more seasoned scholars. So everybody contributing into the piece, right? And that is something that actually Soli, and this is something that I learned from Soli, and because starting when I started working with Soli had already edited journals, a book. So she has been really mentoring me in the process and been incredibly generous with her knowledge. And so I'm always thankful that she has been willing to go with my
I am thankful for you, Mintzi.
And So no, because
You
I've
keep us
learned,
organized.
yeah. Yes,
No,
I do.
and Mitzi is a driving force. I think this is an example of a collaboration, right? We have different strengths, we have different passions, and being able to our own negotiations and writing together, writing the introductions. I mean, we had to write 2 introductions together. Doing that work allows us to be kind to ourselves and to each other, and then also to our authors as well.
So, I don't know if we addressed all the parts from your question though.
Mentoring. Well, I did want to add something. I think that and this is something that it goes larger into kind of my work with graduate students and some of the other work I've been doing with some other folks in folklore, that it's not just about this written product. It's really about the process of the way things are changing, the relationship between the academy and, say, the public sector, the relationship between different communities and their right to self-representation. In folklore, there's a large component of people who work with communities, people who they're called public sector folklorists. They do work with communities, and the work they do is really important, and is not often represented in the written work of folklore journals and other places. But we're changing that. We're trying to do that with the new GAF volume. But I think that even within our own field, there's this disconnect, Abagunde, in terms of kind of understanding how people can be in the world and do this work in multiple ways. So what I'm thinking is, instead of fetishizing the product as an editor, fetishizing the product of the book or the published currency, which is important if you're in an academic job, but also learn how to create connections and relationships and context for understanding that the work is so much more than what this published or printed product is, right? That's just the tip of the iceberg, actually.
No,
right.
Yeah, and to piggyback with what Solimar was saying, right, the whole process, I think, has been so rewarding in so many different ways, and not to put words into the mouth of our collaborators, right? But one of the things that for Soli and I, it was very important, was not to try to put everybody into one mold, but to really help all of our contributors to find their own voice and to be able to present the work that they wanted to do. So it was not about something that you asked, also this whole gatekeeping in terms of editing, but it was actually, no, let's break down these gates, and especially to see how we can help our contributors, right, who are trusting us with their work, and to give them the respect and kindness and compassion that they deserve, because again, they're trusting us. And some of the pieces and theorizing in the book are incredibly personal.
Yes.
And some of them are not necessarily, some cases actually, yes, reliving trauma. And so how do we help our authors through this process so that it's not a traumatic process for them, but in ways that to help them so that their voice and what they wanted to say actually is to help realize their dreams in terms of what they wanted to do, and not to give too much for our current project, right, that we're now co-editing, and now Rachel has joined us in our editing adventures, right, in this new edited volume, for a special issue for this journal, which we submitted a couple of weeks ago. That one also, we're playing with format again. The journal has never seen what we submitted. So we'll see how it goes.
It's different. We're definitely playing with the bilingualism and a whole range of ideas.
And format and structure.
Yeah. So I was wondering, I don't know, Abagunde, how you feel, but eventually maybe we can do this at the end. But since we are talking about our collaborators, our contributors here, they're here, some of them, and it might be nice to hear from them, actually.
Actually, I was going to do that. We're always so much in tune, and I wanted to do that because I want to be mindful, but I wanted to just say thank you for all of the collaborators who are here. There's several who are here, and I think it would be marvelous to hear some of your thoughts and questions of what the process is, because what I'm hearing Mintzi and Soli say, this is there are multiple things that must happen, right? One, to trust your voice, right? And to also look for the places and ask for the places that will honor that voice. And on the other side, as you recognize that, being able to be in places and positions that can create the opportunities for that, and mentoring, right? Being able to recognize, because what is it? I appreciate that. What is it to invite an undergraduate student? I love doing that and co-publishing with undergraduate students, but also working with that student throughout, right? That's a commitment to community and scholarship as community and creativity, right? That is often not found. So yes, thank you for all of that. But I want to open it up to the collaborators who are here. If you have any thoughts on these questions and the process at all, and then for questions that the audience may have, you can put that in the chat as well. But I do want to open that up, and I'm going to leave the recording on. Still, as we're going to just ask, any thoughts you may have on what's been asked and what's been shared. And you can just jump right in. You can put your hand up, put that wonderful.
I'll call on some of my authors.
Put people on the spot.
Phyllis, say something.
Well, it was a pleasure to contribute something to this book. And the support that in writing my piece that I felt. I think I had a long conversation with Mintzi one night about the editor's comments and what they were looking for, and I felt supported in that. So I really appreciated that. And I've worked with Soli and Mintzi in other circumstances, and that has been fruitful and nurturing as well. And so, their commitment to doing this work of opening up the Academy to a variety of voices is real. And I feel like I'm marching alongside them in this work, and hope that we can really make a difference. I think I was really pleased that they were interested in my piece on being a parent of a child with disability. And Mintzi talked about really living trauma. It was, telling a story that sometimes people don't want to hear, but also connecting it to how it needs to be heard, and having the space to tell that story. That was one I needed to tell. Having the space to tell that story was really important for me, and also it allowed me to make connections to my work as well. And so, yes, I really felt that this was an important space, and it was a space that I don't think would have been available in some other venues.
Thank you so much for that, Phyllis. Thank you. That nurturing, nurturing, but just having the space to write the story, to create the story, to tell the story, to connect and reconnect the story to the work, right? And when we think about the amount of time that we spend doing our work, going back to what you said, Mintzi, about the research, it's an embodied process. Like we're not, it's not separate, it's not marked on us, not unmarked on us, right? That we carry the work that we do. Corey.
Hi, thank you. I'm never sure I want to talk about this part of my work, but Mintzi and Soli, you know, you guys were very, very supportive throughout this whole process, extremely encouraging and always so incredibly cheerful. But seeing as you're talking about the issue of trauma, I have to say, like, this is the only thing that I've ever written where, like, while editing it, I found myself at 2 a.m. in the morning editing it and crying. And we were at the very last stages of this publication, right? This was in August when we were doing final revisions. And one of the people who I was working with in this project early on died under violent circumstances. And so I was really happy to have the chance to include a part of that story in here, because it was a story that wasn't being written. It was a story that was being ignored in the media at the time, kind of thing. And while in my project, I fully anonymize everyone I work with for their protection, and I was at this stage of whether or not I should even include this in any way in print. But I discovered that I was like, somebody has to write this down.
Right.
Like, this person's life should not just be erased in this way. And they were able to let me give me that time and a little bit extra space in order to put that in there within this project. So thank you.
We're very proud to have your piece, Corey. Those stories need to be told.
Yeah. And the same way also with Phyllis and all the pieces, right? Where a lot of our contributors really, you know, again, as I was saying, they trusted us with their work, and it's just get the book. It's so good when it comes out. I mean, I know it's I'm being probably very biased here, but it's really good, and the work that everybody contributed is amazing, and we're just so humbled and like that everybody trusted us.
Well, you're not. I don't think you're being biased. You're just being honest, right? So, and I think what you're also doing, like in this, again, thank you, Phyllis, and thank you, Kurt, that it's really important, right? That we talk about how we mentor, what it is that we do, how we model the work that we do as scholars, as creatives, as community, even the fact that if this were of a formal physical space for a book launch, what you have here, we may not have been able to have, as many of the collaborators here with us, right? So even in the modeling of this, of inviting and doing that and being able to hear that process, right? Because this is also part of the revisioning what theory and method and community mean in the academy, right? Of being able to allow for these type of spaces and to question as part of the process and part of the sharing what it means to create narrative, what it means to create different types of histories, and even to challenge what is history, right? What is history? Not only what is academic, but what is history? And whose stories get to be told in what way, right? What does it mean to be authentic? That wonderful word that is often used, right? But what does it mean to find your voice? And what does it mean, particularly again, for emerging scholars, for elder scholars, what does it mean to be able to say, this is not, I'm being constricted, literally, my voice is being constricted, and I have another way of speaking, right? So Phyllis, I see your hand, and I want to invite anybody else, not just the collaborators who may want to ask a question or say something, to please do so before Sully calls on you again. Phyllis?
I think it's important to be able to bring your intersectional self into the work, and there was space in this effort for us to present ourselves that way. And often there is not that space.
Very much so. Thank you.
I'm tempted to call on Gloria, but I'm not going to do that to you.
Anyone else? Any questions or comments? Alberto.
Thank you guys. Thank you all for sharing, Soli, Mintzi, and also all the contributors. It's great to hear this. The way you guys describe the interventions in the field is really important. I'm grateful that even not as a folklorist, just grateful for the way that you're charting a path through which we can do that. But I wonder if you might be able to say just a little bit more about, since I was trying to pull up the table of contents here, but just a little more about the scope of the project, right? Thinking maybe about its geographic reach, or about the kind of, I don't know, I was thinking mostly about geography, but the range of experiences that are included in here, and what that might mean within the longer conversation that we're having.
So let's see, we have represented, in terms of geography, there are pieces from Latin America, so specifically Chile, Mexico, there's from Cuba, Puerto Rico, from the United States, there is Native American, African American,
Latino.
Latino, from Africa, we have Wolof,
Senegal. Yeah.
Senegal, so Senegal. So there
Native
is
American.
There's Native American, yeah. So we tried to cover as much as we did, but we also were limited by what we received. So for example, it's been a while since the last time that I read this book, but Martin's piece, is that one like for his work, do you remember, is that the part of the work from the Chinese Cuban, or did he just? No, it's just the beating, right?
Yeah, he was working on the beating, and then Alex's piece dealt with Haiti and rebellion and ritual. So yeah, and we addressed that in our introduction, that it's by no means supposed to be kind of expansive of every single kind of experience. I mean, we would have loved to have some more Asian and Asian American representation, other component, but it's charting a path, like kind of that rhizomatic path I was talking about, charting a path. And in terms of the kinds of work we have, analysis of, Katie Borland's here, analysis of Sugarcane Alley, the film, and how that would work pedagogically, and thinking about that theoretically, if you want to say something, and how that would work in the classroom. So we have, literary and film analysis alongside autoethnography, as well as art, looking at material culture and other forms of artwork. Corey's piece deals with visual culture in the LGBTQ community in Cuba. So we have a range. But I did call on Katie, so maybe Katie wants to say something.
Katie, before I'm going to interrupt you for just a second, yeah. I just want to say that the range that you just described is so impressive, right? Like there's a kind of global reach to the project that I find impressive. So that's great.
Yeah, thank you. And there is, believe it or not, there is a connecting theme. Right? Yes. What we're really trying to get at is kind of in what ways do people don't like this word, vernacular culture, in what ways do the communities that we work with, and then the creative knowledges that they express, even if they do it through literature, art, poetry, face-to-face ritual, how are they leading us in understanding their world and their experiences, and very real experiences of violence and trauma, the world that we see right now, right? And it's not trying to explain that away. So Katie.
Well, I just want to say it's, Phyllis, you are so incredibly eloquent, just off the cuff, and there's no way I can follow you, but because my piece was really kind of a pedagogical intervention, and it was more, your traditional scholarly article. But I will say this, I think that for me, you know, often when you're writing things and the very obvious sort of blind spots that and we all have, right? And I think Mintzi and Soli were just terrific as editors in like pushing me to look at those blind spots, right? And think, you know, think a little differently about how I'm, you know, positioning texts and authorities and things like that. So I really, really appreciated that. I felt like I learned a lot from the project. I'm not a junior scholar. I should know better. And still,
You're great. You're great.
Yeah.
learning. So
We
yeah.
all are all the
Yeah.
time. If I don't have to learn something new, then what's the point, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we were so happy to have a piece, the pedagogical piece. I mean, I think that's going to be one of the reasons why people are going to be turning to the book. I mean, it's really great.
I see.
Selena,
Doing it. I know you all did the hard, heavy lifting work. We just wrote some stuff and sent it to you.
Hi, I'm so excited about this text and thank you for presentation and to all the authors. And I have been threatening the two of you to run a book club when this book comes out, because I'm very excited to dig into all the pieces. And I love this question that Soli just presented about, you know, what can everyday people teach us about leading, particularly through struggle? I'm wondering, and I hate to put you on both on the spot, but what's another question that you hope readers bring to your book?
Bring or take with them, or is that means the same thing?
Bring, like if we were going to be studying this book and looking to it for the DNA or the pathways about how to bring the voices from the margin into the center of our field, like what are questions you hope we bring with us?
So the one that first came to mind, right now is, and it has to do because of what I've been reading and prepping for the workshop on Friday, is this whole idea of how we're presenting knowledge and what counts or not counts as knowledge. And so for me, is definitely is this idea of how can we dismantle these very European Enlightenment, you know, ideas of knowledge and how knowledge is supposed to look like, right? So that we can, so it's like, so what are different models? And I think one of the things is that, you know, all the pieces are so different in the book. And the voices of the authors. So here you have, again, different models in terms of how to engage with knowledge. So, but again, this is the question that we go in, but also because it's the one that I've been toying with for the last probably year.
I think for me, I mean, we had raised so many questions in the introduction, but because we envision multiple audiences, right? I know I show my work, and I sometimes have to translate it into Spanish to the people I work with. I think that one of the questions would be, do I see myself in there somehow, and not as like a representation of like a specimen in a cage. But does this story resonate, or do these experiences, do these images, do they resonate with something that I'm going through? I mean, I really want there to be a point of entry where that this is not a book that's just dead, right? That it has living connections. I do a lot of work with affect and living connections to how people feel, how people sense, how people are in the world. I mean, we can think of maybe the book is embodied with all these different voices of our authors and all of our different experiences. And I think that's part of it too. So I would really like, you know, I would like for people to see something of their own experiences and their own struggles in there. And we, like I said, we couldn't cover everything. We don't try to, but try to, you know, work with folklore to make those connections rather than to categorize and to, you know, monopolize the representation of people's words, wisdom, works. I hope that makes sense. I wanted there to be, people to take with them a sense of connection.
Thank you so much, Selena. Thank you so much for that great
Wait,
great question. Go ahead, Mintzi.
No, it's just that I had called also on Gloria and I had put Gloria on the spot. So I don't know if she wants to say something or not before we kind of continue moving on to
Gloria.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity to just do this crazy thing that I did, that I'm like, oh crap, it's going to be like the worst thing when people look at the book, but that's just my brain going on. But anyways, I'm still super mega grateful. You allowed me to express, like you've mentioned, everybody else, some really, really, really difficult topics in a very, what I thought was really entertaining way, or for me, it was fun way of exploring topics that otherwise I would, morbidly, they are kind of fun, but in this sort of ha dark sense of humor that happens when one is living through drama. So I'm really, really happy for that, because I really had no other place to put all of that information. And it also was something, I feel that there's a lot that isn't being talked about. At least in the case of Puerto Rico, Hurricane Maria came, the island was rediscovered. Now it's being recolonized and reconquered, like for the 5th time or whatever in 500 years. And there's no historical, like even what happened 2 years before that, and what Puerto Ricans, the trauma that we've been carrying for the last at least 10 years with the whole financial disaster we've been having, that's all been sort of left to the side. So this really gave me a really good opportunity to talk about everything just before Maria.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just grateful. Like, even if people consider or get confused with the piece and are like, why is it so text heavy and these images are just randomly there or whatever, I'm still grateful for that. So I'll just leave it to everybody else to keep this amazing conversation going.
The experimental nature of the piece was wonderful. It forces people to look at the artwork that you're creating and to think through it. I think that a lot of the most creative work is, and I love the way you use footnotes. I mean, a lot of the best creative work is playing with creativity and restructuring footnotes. So.
Oh, thank you so much. I want to just be mindful of time, and I want to wrap up here. I'm going to then stop the recording, and then anybody who wants to stay on afterwards to have more conversation, that is, that's perfectly fine. But I do want to thank everyone for coming and spending this time with us. And I do, Mintzi, I thought in the beginning, I thought I heard you say knowledges. And because this is actually kind of a continuation of a conversation I was in yesterday with artists and librarians about creativity. And so one of the things, just in both of your minds, a number of the questions I had, you answered, but just thinking about this idea of knowledges and not knowledge. Like, we think about knowledge in its singular term, like we think about archive, right? And then maybe archives, but knowledge is always singular. And so what does it feel like to you all, the possibilities of new knowledges, and how do they coexist, right? In some cases, some things we want to topple over, and some things we want to revision, and some things we want to completely destroy. But what happens, how do you see new knowledges being created here, and how they might coexist, not only in this text, right, but outside of the text? How do you envision that? And then we'll end there, and then I'll stop recording after you respond.
Actually, we talk about that in the introduction. There is a section when we talk about that our approach or ideas is not to kind of like this idea of toppling down or whatever we're talking about anthropology and burning down or stuff like that, right? But it's to to rethink what we understand and think about as a canon, right? So it's to see how all these different knowledges are in communication, are in dialogue. So we have, in the introduction, actually this section where we're talking about it's how, for example, we can think about Deleuze and also Glissant and all these other thinkers actually in conversation and not just putting one over the others. Or just privileging one type of knowledge over the other types of knowledges, right? So that is something that actually we address in the introduction, and we're like, this is part of our invitation from the margins. It's come and join us so that you can see actually the amazing things and the amazing points of view and what we can contribute. And part of it that also we're talking about it, and that we mentioned in the introduction, right, is this not reshuffling, but this invitation is coming from a place of love. But this idea of love from like Chela Sandoval, that is kind of like a revolutionary love. So not just your kind of like romantic February, like 14 February love, but that it's a revolutionary type of love. And that again, it's very much, we need to rethink how these different types of knowledges are in communication, not isolated. Soli?
Yeah, and I think that this is something when we do talk in all of the projects we've been working on, I say do not be afraid of tension.
Yeah.
We're going to invite you to come into the margins, but some people are going to disagree, and some people are going to be very upset. And so the love and anger and all these different sensations or feelings, sensations are productive, right? And doesn't mean that we're always going to agree. And there's some ideas that we think should be thrown out. And there's some other ideas where, there's different ways of tackling same issues of injustice or issues of trauma. There's different ways of dealing with the very real like materialities that are in the chapters. So we can't run away from conflict because it's kind of at the heart of the book as well. So but this coexistence is a way to avoid the gaslighting that happens in terms of explaining away the actual very difficult situations that the communities that we are part of and that we work with, or that we work with and may not and became kin by working with them, that they actually have to deal with, right? And so we have to look at those realities face on, and that means that sometimes certain kinds of knowledges are violent, and we are going to be talking about how people have produced their own kinds of knowledges to not only respond, but to continue living their lives and doing their work. So I just wanted to add that part.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, because it's true. Some people are going to read the book and they're going to be like, it's going to be threatening, and that's okay. That's okay.
That's okay. It is definitely okay. I want to thank Dr. Mintzi Martinez-Rivera and Dr. Solomon Otero for this really wonderful afternoon and spending time with us. Thank you to all of the collaborators who came and who spoke. Thank you all for coming to this Trailblazers and Innovators event, Theorizing Folklore from the Margins, Critical and Ethnical Approaches. We definitely at the Graduate Mentoring Center, but to echo what Soli just said, we invite you into the margins and we invite you into the tension. There is much to be found there and much to be done there. And there certainly is much to love there. And so thank you all so very much. We look forward to seeing you at future and upcoming events.